of champion racing pigeon feeding secrets. What does preparing before the race mean? Preparing before the race means preparing your birds for the type of race they will compete in. This video does not cover setting up or different psychological tricks you can play to motivate birds. This video covers how to physically prepare your birds for the race they are going to compete in. It covers how much you should train, rest and feed your birds. Preparing for sprints, races between 50 to 150 miles. A sprint race in good weather with good wind will not stress out a racing pigeon that is in good physical condition. They will be able to compete in the race, make good time and be ready to compete the next week. If you are making short tosses during midweek, continue to do so even if you plan on shipping to a sprint race on that weekend. Feed the birds as you normally do. If you feed in the evening, you may want to change to a morning feeding on the day of shipping. The birds will be ready. A sprint race is often just another training toss compared to the long difficult races yet to come in the season. Preparing for middle distance, races between 200 to 400 miles. A good weather and wind middle distance race can be flown with the birds bouncing back and racing another middle distance race the following weekend. Sometimes, in very difficult weather or conditions, a middle distance race can be just as tough or long as a 500-mile race. This is probably the most difficult distance to prepare. There is a fine edge on the nutrition necessary versus lack of loading that may be required. On a good weather, good wind race, you can feed the birds as you normally do the day of shipping. If you feed in the evening, continue to do so. If time allows, you may want to move feeding up a couple of hours. If that is not possible, it won't be a detriment. You should ensure the birds get a good drink before shipping. I am not a fan of force watering birds, as I feel there is a danger whenever you attempt for force water via a syringe or other method. The best method is to remove the water pans an hour after feeding the night before shipping night. Feed again in the morning and put the water pans back for a half hour. Remove the pans again. When given their meal the day of shipping, put the pans back after feeding. The birds should take good long drinks prior to shipping. Most racing trucks trailers do have water systems for the birds, but there is no guarantee that your birds will be on the right side of the shipping crate or will take it upon themselves to drink. If it looks as though it is going to be a hard race with rough weather, prepare the birds as though it was going to be a long distance race. Note, for hot weather, if you are in a hot weather climate, do not remove the water pans at all. Ensure water is in front of the birds all day as they will need to hydrate throughout the day in the loft. Preparing for long distance, races between 400 to 600 plus miles. Most clubs consider them 2-day races. Race winners will generally on a good race clock by the end of the first day. Long distance races are different because the birds need to be nutritionally prepared much differently. There are two philosophies regarding preparing for long distance races. One is to carbohydrate load the pigeons. The other is to include fats and oil-rich foods as well. A good rule is to consider the race by the distance. The longer the distance, the earlier in the week you need to start preparing the birds. You also need to not feed your middle distance and sprint birds the same as you will prepare your long distance birds. This will require selecting your pigeons in advance and separating them when you feed. You still need to feed the birds enough to nutritionally sustain them, but not so much that you are overfeeding them. This is probably one of the most difficult things for a fancier to master. What you are changing is the types of feed you are supplying your pigeons. For a 400-mile race, start mixing corn, maize, into their diet on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday if you are shipping on a Thursday night. I would give safflower on Wednesday and Thursday as well. For a 500-mile race, start adding corn on Monday and start adding safflower on Tuesday. On Wednesday night I might even add peanuts. For a 600-mile race, start adding corn on Monday, safflower on Tuesday and peanuts on Wednesday. Some fanciers like to mix their feed with wheat germ oil or other fatty oils to increase the fat or carbohydrate amount of the feed. When the race is over, after the return, the first thing I'm going to do when I get home is prepare for the next race while this week's race is in progress. Wait a minute. Shouldn't we take things one race and 1 week at a time? Yes and no. We do take the races one at a time, or in my combined two at a time, because we sometimes race a medium and long distance race on the same weekend. On the day of the return you actually have two different tasks. One is to recuperate the birds that are coming home and the other is to prepare the birds for the next race. Here are things to consider while preparing for the return in regards to feeding and nutrition. Water. This is the most important thing your birds need when they return from a race. A bird can fly off almost half its body weight on a race. They exhaust their energy reserves while racing and a good portion of the weight they are losing is water. If you change water pans normally in the evening, ensure you put fresh water in the loft the morning of the race. You may want to add electrolytes to the water on the day of return. While in the race truck, your birds probably drank from a community water tray. They were exposed to other birds and any ailments those birds might have had. So on the second day after the return you will surely want to add a 3-in-1 or 5-in-1 medication as a preventive. On race day, I add half teaspoon on Clorox to a gallon of water for their drinking water. Feed. If you shipped a long distance race on Thursday and now it's Saturday or Sunday, a returning bird is going to be famished. The danger is that they will gorge themselves on feed. Here's where preparing for next week's race can interfere with recuperating from this week's race. If I am not going to be home for the return, I put barley in the feeder. The birds in the loft will not eat too much barley as they don't care for it much. A bird returning will eat as much as he needs but won't gorge. Feeding barley to returning birds along with the birds that remained home will not interfere with loading the birds for next week. You can think of it as feeding light to heavy. If you have a separate section for birds returning to enter, you can place a small feeder with pellets. Pellets are nutritionally good, easy to digest but will cause a bird to drink lots of water. A returning bird will need to consume a lot of water anyway, so it's a good way to feed them. I do not like to feed pellets to the birds that remained home and will be racing next week. Hope you enjoyed the Feeding Secrets series. Be sure to check out the training and conditioning series that will be out soon. Thanks for watching, your free downloads are below. Please like, share and subscribe. Thank you. Part 4 of Champion Racing Pigeon Feeding Secrets.